Those of you who are short-sighted will feel me when I say that mostly I view the world through a blurry filter, and I actually quite like it that way, but occasionally when I put on my glasses I think to myself, oh, this place needs a clean. Also, I look in the mirror and I think, I have a case of the hairy quarantine brow. You know what it is, you know that hairy quarantine brow. I figured today we could go through a 0 to 100 brow transformation. We'll do the hair removal, the shaping, all of my brow philosophies, because you know I have them. And yeah, mostly I do my brows myself. I think if you ask most beauty creators, they will also tell you that they do their brows themselves, and it's because we're all just control freaks and no one knows my brows like I do. P.S. If you are using this quarantine period to grow out your eyebrows, maybe reverse some over plucking, I applaud you, very noble quest. I actually grew out my brows properly a few years ago. Legit, one of the best things that I ever did. It changed my face, much recommend. I actually did a blog post with all my tips and tricks on how to grow out your brows. If you're interested, I will link that in the description. All right, a bit of prep before we start. I'm gonna take some Bioderma, like you want a non-oily makeup remover, and just use this on a Q-tip to remove any of the oils that might be underneath the brow here. This will just make the brows easier to grip. Also, sterilize your tweezers. I use 70% alcohol. This is actually brush cleanser, much of muchness. It's 70% alcohol. And it's a good idea to sanitize your tweezers because hygiene, but also it removes any of the buildup of oils on the tip of the tweezer that could make hairs hard to grip. And this way you get like all those like little fine hairs. It's so satisfying. Oh, I'm gonna get you guys to come in a bit closer. Come in a bit closer, why don't ya? You can see my paws, that means we're very intimate friends now. So I like to start with tweezers just for those big fat brow hairs that we clearly don't want, right? The ones that are almost sort of making their way onto our lid. These are easy ones, we don't have to think too deeply about these. So the tweezers that I'm using here are the Rubis tweezers. You guys, when I tried these tweezers, I was like, oh, is this what tweezers are meant to be? These are definitely the best tweezers that I've ever tried. Not that I would consider myself to be a tweezer connoisseur, but you know. I feel like I've got most of the obvious offenders. Now we're actually moving into shaping the brow itself. And I think it's really important at this point to kind of like stop and take a step back, because it's so easy to just sort of mindlessly pluck. It's satisfying, right? But we've got to really step back and look at ourselves from further away to determine which hairs should stay and which should go. And my theory is, if you are not sure, leave it. Leave it for another day, for another time, because it's much easier to pluck one tomorrow, but it doesn't grow back that fast. I'm just sort of plucking the ones that seem really out of place. Like I want my brow to be a fluid arch, and there will be a few hairs that almost detract from the arch, and that's what I'm attempting to remove. I think I'm about done, but I think maybe I'll just take this one here because it's kind of distracting me. You guys are probably laughing at the importance I place on one hair. One brow hair means everything. Now, in actuality, there is a ton of really fine baby hairs underneath our brows, and you might want to clean that up. It looks a little bit more polished. I really like these brow razors. They're by Revlon. You can just find them at Priceline, and they're great. I'm going to hold the end of my brow taut and just lightly, carefully, just remove any downy baby hairs. Can I do this with my terrible eyesight? Probably not. I only have 2 hands, so I'm just going to be very careful. The reason you would hold your brow up is that it gives a little bit more of a flatter surface so that your razor can actually do its job. I know that Nikki Tutorials, I believe she shaves underneath her brows because it helps her eyeshadow to blend better, which, yeah, makes total sense. So the area between the brows is a little bit of like a problem spot for me because I have really thin, delicate skin. And if I were to get my skin waxed, it would just break out in terrible inflammation. Even if I pluck in that area, I will get breakouts kind of inflamed, angry sensitivity. And the only way that I could remove hair from the center between my brows is using the Veet Precision Styler. I'm always careful when doing brows that I don't remove too much from the center of the brows, because there is this weird optical illusion where too much space between the brows makes the nose look larger. I can attest to this because when I look at my high school photos, I'm like, what the hell? I had one person who insisted that I had a nose job. I was like, no, dude, it's the brows. It's all in the brows. When it comes to the top of the brow, I think it's really dependent on your brows and how they grow. I typically prefer to leave the top part of the brow alone because I think it kind of creates a little bit more of a natural effect. But sometimes, depending on like how much baby hair or stray hairs I've got going on, I will use my Veet Precision Styler just to capture those. And then before I fill in my brows, I'm just going to take my cushion foundation, whatever's left on that little puff, and I'm just going to push it underneath the brow. So this is not so much to like carve the brow out as much as it is just to dull some of the veins and the redness underneath the brow that can make the brow look a little bit messy or unkempt. Unkempt? I discovered this word the other day. For 20 something years, I've been saying unkept. And someone was like, I'm pretty sure it's unkempt. The more you know. Whoa, we're making some moves. These brows are glowing up. So step 3 is filling in your brows. You know, powders, pomades, pencils, all of these different formulas, brow pens are now becoming popular. I can't tell you definitively like you should be using a brow pencil and you should be using a brow powder. I think it's more of a matter of preference and how you like your brows to look. So powders will often give you a little bit more of a softer effect. Pencil is somewhere in the middle and pomade is perhaps a little bit more, a bolder brow perhaps. I think today I'm going to be using this pencil by Pony Effect, which is a Korean brand. This pencil is quite a hard formula. So a hard pencil will give you little payoff, whereas a softer pencil will give you a greater payoff. So if you have a little bit of a heavy hand, then a harder pencil might be more for you. Also, harder pencils tend to have less waxes in them, which makes them longer lasting, and softer pencils tend to have more wax in them, which gives them greater propensity to move on the skin. Just a little FYI. So for my brow, I'm going to I typically start here in the arch, and I do little strokes in the natural direction that my hair is moving. So hair sort of moves this way, and then as we go forward, it changes direction. So I sort of go whatever direction my hair is naturally growing. And I know a lot of times with brow routines on YouTube, we'll see sort of, a person mark a line across here and down here and on top of the brow here and then fill in the lines. I have tried that technique and I looked like a Disney villain, just a little bit too graphic for my face. But I do think that it's like, give it a go. Worst case scenario, you don't like it and then you wash it off. But it is a good idea to try a lot of different techniques. There is no right and wrong. Just because I'm doing it this way doesn't mean the Instagram brow is bad. Like I love an Instagram brow on some other people, just not so much myself. Then I'm going to address this little dip in my brow, and I actually see this in a lot of people. There is, in my tail, there's a little dip here. And I see that a lot. So I'm going to actually brush my hairs down here, because it gives me greater visibility on what's going on, and just sort of fill in that dip. Again, working in the direction that my hairs are growing here. And then before I go too crazy, I'm gonna brush them back up. I also like to elongate my tail a little bit. Look, I have short ass brows. These are some short ass brows. But after many YouTube comments of people being like, make your brows longer, okay, I'll make them longer just for you guys. Really tapering the end of that brow so that it sort of fades away into nothing. So when it comes to this portion here, I actually like to keep this relatively untouched. Maybe I'll just do a few little fine hairs, but again, it totally depends. If you're very sparse here, then that might be an area where you really want to build up. All right, onto my other brow. This is my, I don't want to say my bad brow. I worked once with a photographer who said that there was no such thing as like a good side of a face and a bad side. There's your favorite side and your maybe not so favorite side. So this is my not so favorite brow. And you know what they say, you know, your brows are sisters, not twins. Mine are very, very distant relatives. They only just discovered each other on 23andMe. My philosophy is always get your brows looking their best independently of one another. I think we're fed this kind of BS about how symmetry is the essence of all beauty. I totally debate that. I think that some of the most celebrated faces are asymmetrical, like Aishwarya Rai. I mean, if you look at photos of her, one of her brows is significantly higher than the other, and it totally gives her face character. It enhances her beauty. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So this brow of mine is actually lower on my face, and also the tail comes down at a much steeper angle. You've got to work with it. I mean, short of like shaving off my tails, which I know some people do, but short of shaving off my tails, there isn't a whole lot I can do about that asymmetry. Might as well learn to love it. Step 4 is optional, but it's a finishing touch that I think really improves the brow, and it's adding texture. So especially if you have quite sparse brows, let's say, there might be areas where you've filled in with a pencil where there's no actual hairs, and you can see this sort of disparity in texture between your naturally fluffy bits and perhaps areas where you're a little bit bald. And I've seen people add texture in numerous ways, like pomades on a really sharp brush to get those kind of discreet hair strokes. I actually like using brow pens. They're just a bit easier. My two favorite formulas of brow pens are, of course, the Suki brow pen and also the Amaterasu liquid brow liner. I'm going to use this one today. So I'm going to look for the areas where I could perhaps do with a few more discreet hair strokes and just draw them in. And I think it's nice when you are mixing textures. Like, for example, if you were to mix like a waxy pencil with a brow powder, or perhaps a pomade with a powder, or a brow pen and a brow pencil, and it's mixing those textures that gives a variety in the brow that makes it look more believable. Don't need to go crazy, just a few little hairs. So you can see here in the dip of my brow, I have no hair growing there. And you can tell that I have no hair. But what if I were to put a few just textured bits? More believable, right? Right? A little bit more believable? We do the best we can. Brow pens are also really great for creating that kind of sharp tail, if that's your vibe. Also, if you like a really kind of bushy brow effect, you can use brow pens to add some texture in the innermost portion of the brow. And this creates that sort of bushy texture if you don't naturally have it. Adding texture is that extra detail. You know, I might not necessarily do this if I'm just going down to brunch, but when I do add that texture, it's entirely worthwhile for those of us who are brow obsessed. I see you. Okay, step 5 is to set the brows into place, because brows, they're cheeky little mofos. You look away for 1 minute, they're running amok. So let's show them who's boss. There are so many products to set brows on the market, but I'll show you my favorites. The Surratt brow pomade is a great one. Actually kind of like a white little toothbrush comb, and this has great waxy kind of hold. But FYI, if you have black brows, this might leave a little bit of an ashy cast, or so I've heard from you guys. I also really love the Hourglass Arch Tinted Brow Gel. This brush is genius. It coats all of the hairs without getting any of the product onto the skin and making the brow look messy. This is like my go-to for like a 30-second day-to-day brow. And then, of course, my very favorite is Pears soap. This was initially used for more theatrical makeup to really give the brows a lot of hold, and it's brilliant. And it's also super cheap. Not so travel friendly, but super cheap. Damp spoolie rubbed into the side of this Pears soap that will probably last me 10 years. And I'm going to brush my hairs pretty much directly up. As I get to the tail, I start moving a little bit more towards the temple, but I want my brows to have a brushed up appearance. A lot of my friends and my family are like, give me brow advice, do my brows. And this is the stage where we always have like a bit of an aha moment, because when you brush your brows directly up, what it does is it creates the illusion that your brow is just a few millimeters higher. And that's considered to be flattering, right? That's the basis of the Botox brow lift and this foxy eye trend that we're seeing on YouTube. It's all about sort of lifting the brows and giving more space between the eye and the brow. It's kind of like a little bit of an eye lift as well. Give it a go. Occasionally I will come across a face that is not conducive to the brushed up brow. A good example is the video that I did with Katie, my friend Katie. She has a brow that doesn't really brush up, but give it a go, report back. Love to hear what you think in the comments. I like these little bushy bits that emerge from the top. I think it's very Vogue. It's that kind of like, that editorial brow that you see in the glossier magazines. But if you don't love that kind of spiky effect, you can actually just square it off a bit like this. And that will give you a little bit more of a polished effect. But I like it a little bit messy. It's a little bit messy, like me. Oh, I feel like a new woman. There is nothing like a fresh brow feel. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. What do the good YouTubers say? Like this video, leave a comment and subscribe. I think that's how it goes. Come say hello to me on Instagram as well, at Karima McKimmie. I'd love to chat to you there. I hope you're having a wonderful day, stay safe, and I'll speak to you very soon.